just that girls deserve their own sports and spaces. 80% of Americans agree. It's now the rule from the U.S. Olympic Committee. It's now the rule from the NCAA, and yet it's still considered a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me today with ReFOCUS. It's great to have you.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you're a fascinating person. I love the fact that we can get together and talk. You were one of the top gymnasts in the country. I think the mid-'80s was that is a rigorous sport. I mean, you guys are injured all the time, right?
It's a very dangerous sport. I think gymnastics and football are the two most ER visits.
Yeah, gymnastics and football.
High school. Yeah.
Orthopedics, or what's going on with the body in gymnastics?
Well,
that's
I think
hard.
There's two kinds of injuries, and I had both. There's repetitive use injuries because you train so hard and so long, and I think hopefully it's shifting. But I mean, I was training 5 hours a day by the time I was 10, 5 hours a day, 6 days a week by the time I was 10. So you get repetitive use injuries like stress fractures. And then because the sport's so dangerous, you also get traumatic injuries. So I broke both of my ankles, I broke my femur, and the culture is such that, let's see if I can explain this, you don't really let yourself heal. You just go back too soon, and that then just creates more injuries because it's thought to be this very young person's sport. So you have, a handful of seasons. You don't want to miss one due to an injury. So I always went back way too soon, got casts off early, and in the process of doing that, I would always break the leg on the other side.
Wow.
Not good.
And you were the national championship. You were like the person in the 85, 86 time frame. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah, and what an amazing accomplishment even in that. You didn't make it to the Olympics, but you were right there. And what kept you out? Was it the injuries and the...
Yeah, I mean, I was in the top sort of 2, 3,
That's
4,
amazing,
85,
just to be able to say that.
85, 86, 87, the years between the Olympics.
Yeah.
And then by the time 88 came around, I actually walked away from the sport about a month before the Olympic trials. The training environment is incredibly abusive, and I had a lot of injuries. I was in a lot of physical pain. I had a serious eating disorder, and truthfully, I unraveled as a young person. I couldn't do it anymore.
And we're going to talk about that, but that's like just part of your story. You're this young woman, young girl, really, when you're doing all of this, and then you were hired by Levi's after your gymnastics career. And then you rose to the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer and President of the brand. It's got to be one of the most recognizable brands in the world, Levi's. And how did you, is it just coming in your DNA here? What's going on for you that everything you do is successful?
I love hard work.
That's got to be it. But it's kind of astonishing. You don't meet many people that start like at 5 and you know where you want to go and you're going.
I just keep work. I love work. I mean, I do. I like to work hard at something, develop mastery. I'm not daunted if I can't do it at first. I keep trying until I can. I would actually argue that my Achilles heel, or sometimes I go too far. I won't stop working. And I should have probably left gymnastics a year earlier before I was so completely falling apart.
Yeah, and that was about 19 when you left?
Exactly right.
That's something. But
and it was tough to rebuild myself.
It's just impressive. Let me ask you, growing up, you're Jewish.
I am.
And there seems to be something that goes on in Jewish households that really does train people to do well. I don't know if it's sacrifice, commitment, all of that and more. Describe that learning environment for a Jewish child and what you're learning.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real focus on education, and it sounds ironic me saying that because I spent a lot of time away from school. I left school early from the time I was in about 4th grade so that I could go train. But there was still an emphasis on education, on reading, on learning, on curiosity. And I think if my grades had ever dropped, they would have pulled me right out of the gym. That was just not an option. You
had to keep both going.
Yeah, you had to be good in school. And that's just that is the culture, whether you're religious or not. That's the culture, I think, in most Jewish families.
Yeah, and as a young athlete, I mean, very few people are going to have that experience to be on the track for Olympic athletes. What is that like to feel like you're on top of the world? I mean, how do you process that in terms of ego and achievement when you're 13, 14, 15?
It's a great question. Your coaches make sure you have no ego. Believe me, they in a way that's pretty destructive and harmful.
I could imagine
the way that they emotionally beat you down and bully you. At least this was my experience, and this was very common throughout the 80s, and it's persisted. I know that it's still pretty prevalent in the culture, the gymnastics training culture. Just constantly being berated. I mean, I'll give you a few examples. Our weight was announced on the loudspeaker at the gym twice a day. We don't coach fat gymnasts. You're a fat pig. I mean, if you're a 13, 14-year-old girl that's very, sensitive.
Wow. Well, I think just normal, that would hurt anybody.
Well, of course, yes. Yeah. But I think 13-year-old girls really want to please people more than most. And to be berated like that, I don't coach fat gymnasts. You gained a quarter of a pound. You have to stay and do 2 hours extra of conditioning. So having too much ego was definitely not a problem. In fact, the opposite was, because I found that when I left the sport and I went on to college, my self-esteem, I was crippled by low self-esteem, despite all that I had achieved, because I grew up in this environment that was so emotionally and physically abusive. When I finally learned to understand it, I was much older, and my therapist, excuse me, explained it to me in this way. He said, if a parent abuses a child, hits them physically, the mother or the father might say, I wouldn't have to do this if you were good.
Right.
It's your fault that I have to do this to you.
Wow.
That's the relationship with my coaches I had. And so you feel really bad about yourself.
Well, it attacks you, the person.
That's right.
With us, we're a marriage and parenting ministry here at Focus on the Family. So the idea is you attack the poor behavior, never the person. You've got to reinforce that child. I love you, I love you, I love you.
Right.
But this behavior is unacceptable.
Right.
And then you go at it that way.
Well, and you come at it with love. It's because I know you're capable of more and doing better that I can hold you to this higher standard, not you're a terrible person inside and out.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to be so hard to process, even as an adult now, that so much of childhood forms your reactions to things. We talk a lot at Focus on the Family about family origin stuff, where you learn your insecurities and your triggers in marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those things come out in marriage, did you have that struggle? Not to get more personal than we want to.
No, it's
fine.
But
that idea where your husband could push a button and you're reacting like, don't tell me not to have another dessert. Right?
I did. I actually was married for 12 years and got divorced, and I'm remarried now, happily so. I think I did have these struggles, and when I was in my late 30s, I wrote a book, my first book called Chalked Up, and that book was really just an attempt for me to understand why, as a successful adult with a good job and 2 children, I still had depression, anxiety, and this very low self-esteem, and that's when I came to understand the abuse in the sport. I would say what I allowed that sort of abusive treatment to continue because I thought I deserved it, whether it was in work situations or friend situations. I don't anymore, so don't worry.
My face is going, what?
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you grow up and you're made to believe, because this is
it's my fault.
That's right.
Everything's my fault.
That's right. And so those are relationships that then you repeat that pattern and you think there's something wrong with you and you deserve that mistreatment. I mean, this wasn't mistreatment per se, but I remember my early days as a young person working in an advertising agency, and if something went wrong, I would take the blame if I had nothing to do with it because I just felt like, well, I could have done something. Everything's my fault.
Yeah.
Everything's my
fault. With all the broadcasts I do with mothers and wives, women have an incredible capacity to do that just at their core.
Yeah.
They always look at themselves first. What have I done wrong? Men, we put it, it's like she made me do it, right back to the Garden of Eden, right? Yeah. It's the woman you gave me. That's why we fell. It's kind of interesting that we have that differentiator with our genders. I mean, that's part of who we are. It might be a testosterone problem that we have as males, but we look at the other guy.
Yeah.
We don't say, what have I done wrong?
Yeah. Well, I think, one thing that goes along with that, is when young people are struggling, young girls versus young boys, adolescents. Boys will often express that rage outwardly, and girls often internalize it through things like eating disorders and cutting. And I had a very severe eating disorder in my late teens. Now, granted, it was encouraged by the coaches because we were weighed in and berated. Who knows if I would have anyway. I certainly had the personality type. But we internalize it and harm ourselves. Boys will get into fights and, it's outward. It's the same thing as you're describing.
It's kind of interesting that way. Of course, there's always the 80-20 rule, but I mean, generally that's very true. You got to the point with your gymnastics that, and maybe this was just after or during, but you became suicidal. That's a tough thing to talk about, but I mean, that's like at the end of your rope, right?
I really was. I mean, I couldn't keep doing the sport. I was in a lot of physical pain because I was training on a broken ankle, which I did not know at the time. I was really unraveling and couldn't do the sport anymore, but I couldn't conceive of myself as anything else.
So your identity was there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is who I am.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know who I was going to be or how I was going to become someone that did other things. And I was a good student, but I wasn't a curious student. All my time, energy, my life went into the gym. And so, I mean, I remember going to college and I lived in a dorm with a lot of athletes who would become professional athletes. And I was so angry because I was like, I was better at my sport than they are at theirs, and they're going to go earn a living at this. And I don't have that option. I mean, it's not a thing in gymnastics. And so I have to figure out who I am all over again. I'm tired. I felt like I was going to the retirement home when I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot. I had to figure it out all over. I mean, thank goodness I did, right?
Yeah.
I figured it out. Yeah. But it was a lot. I had had this whole career by the time I was 18 or 19.
Yeah. It must have a finish of being done, of finality, and you're only 20, just coming into 20 going, okay, I still got 3/4 of my life to live.
I know. And so I was really depressed. I also, because of the treatment, the abusive treatment, just felt awful about myself. And I couldn't see a way out of the sport because everybody wanted me to keep going.
Yeah. Let me ask you this connection because it was in the news. That was Dr. Nasser.
Yeah.
When you look at women's gymnastics is a great example where women are abused.
Yeah.
And for decades.
Yeah.
And that was his issue.
Yeah.
He was abusing gymnasts and doing things as a doctor that he should not have been doing.
Doctor.
And thankfully courageous women stepped forward and said, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah.
But what's really stunning in all of that is the way that women are not protected, that there's not more of an effort to come around them. And we're going to get to it, but that's why you even started your company, XXXY, with the whole transgendered issue in sports. And we're going to get there. But just speak to the Nasser thing. Like, hello, where is everybody?
Yeah. So I made a documentary film called Athlete A, which is about the Nasser story.
Athlete A.
Yes. You can watch it on Netflix. We won an Emmy for Best Investigative Documentary. Thank you. It came out in 2020. And what I tried to do with the film, because by the time it came out in 2020, that story was pretty widely known. He had already been sent to prison for life. But USA Gymnastics and the USOPC, which is based here in Colorado Springs, were very much trying to say, this is one bad apple. He's gone. Everything's fine. And my view is because that it was deeply entrenched in the culture, that there's a lot more Nassers in the sport, and that this culture of emotional and physical abuse allowed for that to happen, right? Because if you emotionally and physically abuse a child, she's sort of beaten down. She doesn't know up from down, and she walks into he was the doctor for Team USA for 30 years, and he treated other athletes at Michigan State University, and under the guise of medical treatment he sexually assaulted them. And USA Gymnastics destroyed evidence of this fact. There is ample evidence that the Olympic Committee knew about it and hid the evidence. This is a culture that was deeply rotten and not supportive of the athletes. They were supporting him and the organization's reputation.
Well, and I guess that's the whole point. You have these young girls. I mean, they're 8, 9, 10
Yep.
that are developing into potential Olympic athletes.
That's right.
And again, it's just that brokenheartedness I have, that there's no adults looking out for them, that that everybody believe the adults. And I think for me, being an orphan kid, I resonate with that. Like, no, listen to the child.
Yeah.
Because children typically tell the truth, actually.
They do. That's interesting. My dad was a pediatrician. He says that all the time. Kids really don't lie. Certainly 80-20. There's examples.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But generally, they're just telling you, they tell you what they see. You're fat. You're skinny.
Right.
Your hair looks funny. Right. Mommy, you don't look so good today. Daddy, you crazy.
Yeah. I think the case of USA Gymnastics, I mean, it happens in other institutions as well. It's this investment in the reputation of the organization, which brings in money for the organization, pays high salaries for the men in charge. The man in charge was a man by the name of Steve Penny. And so everything gets warped and twisted, and we don't listen to the children, the young women. This was all before the Me Too movement started, so not that wasn't without its excesses. It was. But there was just 30 years young girls had reported this, and organizations time and again, the police, USA Gymnastics, the FBI failed to investigate for a full year and a half.
Which is amazing. Just look the other way.
They were just
they can't be accurate. These kids don't know what they're talking about.
I mean, they were actively cajoled into not investigating.
Well, okay, that's different. But so that lays kind of the groundwork. I want to get to your career at Levi's. Yeah. I worked for a time. Gene went to UC Davis in Northern Cal, and I worked the Bay Area. And Levi Strauss was certainly a big name there, along with Ghirardelli's chocolate, right?
Yeah.
Those are kind of the two iconic brands there. But you finished college, I would take it, right? You did finish college. Was it marketing or?
No, I went to Stanford and I graduated in 1992. And I had double major in political science with a focus on U.S. politics and communication with a focus on film.
So you end up at Levi's. You worked there 20 years?
23 years.
23 years.
I had a few jobs before that, but 23 years.
But you worked your way up in that organization.
I
You
did.
became the chief marketing officer. Amazing that you didn't have a marketing degree, but there you go. And also president of the brand.
Yeah, I was chief marketing officer for 8 years and got promoted to brand president in 2020.
Wow. And so COVID has hit. You're kind of in the Bay Area, right? You're scratching your head going, okay, maybe keeping kids out of school isn't a good thing. How much backlash did you receive for that thought?
It was a tough time. I had lived in San Francisco for over 30 years, 35 years. I had been of the left, and I was watching this utterly harmful, illiberal policy take hold. That, by the way, protected the elite and harmed the most vulnerable, whether it was children, the children in public schools. I mean, keep this in mind. Public playgrounds were closed for 10 months in San Francisco. Kids had no place to play.
Right.
Public schools were closed for 19 months while the private schools opened just a few months in. And yet the people sending their kids to private schools were screaming at the rest of us, stay home and stay safe. So it was just it was so hypocritical. And we were harming the most vulnerable children. 60% of San Francisco public school students are on free or reduced lunch, meaning sort of at or below the poverty line.
That's how they eat every day.
That's how they eat. That's where they find a trusted adult who is looking out for them. I was very concerned about all of it, lockdowns, everything, but I focused my advocacy on children because I thought that would be like a bridge issue. We all care about children, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Wrong. Apparently wrong.
Right.
So
you would hope.
The backlash was pretty swift from corporate America broadly, from San Francisco, my friends, my family. But I persisted because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and in that context, were you scratching your head going, how could you not see what I'm seeing? That's been one of the difficulties, I think, for us in the culture. Focus is right center. We have definitions of what we believe because of our biblical worldview.
Sure.
And I know you're not a Christian, and that's okay. We could still talk and
Absolutely.
have agreement and disagreement about how we see the world. That's actually normal, everybody. kind of pushing people to think one way. That's what's not normal or healthy.
Right.
Even in medicine, you remember the big COVID stuff. And I remember a Stanford doctor being on the news saying, it's not good for scientists to be forced into alignment. We need disagreement in medicine to come to the right conclusions, right?
That's the definition of science.
Right. I mean, but the lack of application there. What did it show you, especially as you said you were a person of the left? And, I so appreciate your honesty. And I'm sure both sides have blind spots. And there's so much multi-dimensional, dimensions to all of this that nobody's one thing or the other. We're complex people with complex thoughts. But in that regard, kind of the idea of being led by the herd, in my lifetime, I can't remember a greater example of this than COVID.
I think that's correct. Yeah, I would agree with you there. And that was astonishing to me. When I moved to San Francisco in 92, it was the first place that ever felt like home to me. And I felt like, I always say, if you ever felt like a weirdo, it was the place for you. If you ever felt different than your peers. And now it's just such an aggressively conformist place. Everybody has to think the same thing. You cannot veer one iota from the far left platform.
Isn't that an irony?
It is
that what they used to be was countercultural. Now they command and demand the culture be a certain way.
But they think they're countercultural, and yet they have all the institutional power. It's so upside down and backwards, but I found myself very alone. Thankfully, my husband and I were completely aligned. It would have been very difficult if we had not been. I still can't believe... When COVID first hit and all of that was happening, I was thinking, what is so wrong with everyone at this time right now? Right. And then I had this moment of realization. Most people would rather stand with the crowd than stand apart and do the right thing. And that's true forever.
Now, why do you think that is? I think I have an idea, which is it's easier.
It's easier. And
and we don't like conflict.
We don't like
beings.
conflict, and we want community. But we want, and if what COVID did was not just that it's easier to stand with the crowd, but you would get sort of kudos for screaming at everybody out the window, stay home and stay safe. For doing nothing, you would get to be the good guy. I mean, the whole thing was so weird, but I don't think that's so different than, I don't know, it made me feel better somehow that's people. That's human nature.
Wow.
There was nothing uniquely horrible about the people in San Francisco during COVID. They are in good company across eras and geographies.
But it does show you the danger of the lack of ability to talk about stuff. The freedom of conscience to be able to say, I don't agree. I don't see it like this.
I completely agree with you. And I'm not saying I accept that, but somehow it made me feel better. There wasn't something uniquely horrible, but it also proves the importance, to your point. There's always people who are willing to stand apart.
Yeah.
There are always brave people who are willing to. And that's what starts movements.
Yeah.
Because eventually people join them if they're speaking truth and they're speaking common sense.
What happened at Levi's? Did you have to leave, or did you feel the pressure, or what transpired there?
It was very difficult. I was for 2 years, very outspoken about schools. And I moved to Denver so that my children could go to school. And I did end up resigning.
Wow. That took courage. It's like now you got to do it over again. This will be your third time of remaking yourself.
I mean, I say in my book, Levi's Unbuttoned, there's only 3 things I've ever quit in my life: gymnastics, my first marriage, and my job at Levi's.
Yeah.
And it's very hard every time because you're closing a door. But if you're willing to take a second to grieve and then get up and keep fighting, you're going to find there's more doors open to you.
Yeah, and some of those are just tough things that people go through. Life is not easy typically. You're in a valley or in many valleys over the period of your life. And, there's a scripture in the Old Testament in Psalms that says he's close to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. And it's almost like this life is a prerequisite to get you there, to be broken and ready, to be humble, to say, okay, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I'm sure in your careers, you saw really proud people that thought they had the world by the tail.
Oh, yeah.
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 And sooner or later, we hit the wall. And then what's left inside of us is what matters.
Yeah. And the thing I really try, because I've had I've lost almost every friend because of my stance on COVID. Literally, they still fractured family relationships as well.
Yeah.
And closer to my husband than ever, my 4 children. But what I've guarded against is not becoming angry and letting that alter the course. I loved that city. I loved working at Levi's. I loved my community, but that didn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I was disappointed in the people that I had called friends in the community and in my colleagues, and it was time to go. And I might long for what it once was, but it's not that anymore. And so I don't want to get mired in anger. I want to pick myself up and do something better.
Yeah. And it's so good. I mean, I think that's been the Christian side, not everybody. I know some wonderful Christian people, but we get angry. I mean, we are out there getting angry at people for things they don't believe in or don't understand or don't know or don't agree with, right? And we're so quick. And that's the human side of who we are, all of us, because it may be a protection mode. I don't know.
I think so.
Just to lash out.
Yeah.
You're wrong, and I'll prove you wrong. And then you get bitter. And as somebody once said, being bitter is like wanting to poison the other guy, but drinking the poison yourself. It's like so foolish.
It feels bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I have certainly had moments, where I've been very angry and very sad. And you get a little dopamine hit from the anger, but it doesn't last. And you just feel rotten inside. I don't want to move through the world that way.
Let me ask you this. One of the observations I've had through COVID and even now with the whole, the Trump thing, and people, it's like something has been unleashed in this country that's ugly, like a can of hate. And it's spiritual, I think. I don't
disagree.
And we're not managing any of that well. It's like, I think social media feeds into it, and it's not helping us get out of it and treat people better. We love, as Christians, we love the commandments in addition to the 10 Commandments, but where the Lord said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
And is your observation that you're seeing this anger on sort of both sides of the aisle?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can't hide it. We need to be honest. That's why I so appreciate you coming from the left and saying, wait a minute, we're not thinking this through and being real and knowing what is true.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just admitting that I think on the Christian side of the equation and culture, we can often go to anger, which is not one of the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I've certainly observed a lot of anger on the left, where they tend to be much more secular. And I think that's a problem. I say this, you're going to laugh. I say this as an atheist. I think there's a religion-sized hole in the hearts of many people on the left.
I would say yes.
A little aimless and over-medicated. And they've found a quote-unquote faith in, I think, misguided ways. The science, politics, I think. So that's one thing, but I think Trump has truly deranged people on the left. I mean, I just had a long conversation with some members of my family on this. They fully admit it. I mean, and that they get so completely enraged and triggered and deranged by it that they can't think clearly. And so it became exacerbated when Trump first got elected. And then you're right, social media is this very polarizing thing, and it rewards the most incendiary statements. Do
it more,
likes.
Get more clicks and the whole bit, which, man, we've got to fight as people of honor. Yeah. We may disagree on, what we believe to be true with faith and things like that, but we could still be honorable people.
I try. When I wrote my second book, I had the chance to go back and look at my tweets during COVID, which was what got me in trouble. And I was very proud of myself. I maintained... I was very diplomatic. I cited facts. I never got angry. I never called anyone names. So I thought, because I wasn't sure. It was sort of like a fever state for a while. But I felt like I conducted myself in a way that I can be proud of.
Which is good. Let's move into the discussion about your company, XXXY. Great name. Let's talk about the genesis. Why did you start this clothing company?
Great. Well, I left Levi's. I took a while to nurse my wounds. I was very sad. I had envisioned myself retiring from there. I started interviewing because, I'm a 30-year corporate executive, very high level. And I was asked on more than one occasion, will you apologize for what you've done? You can't work here if you don't apologize for what you've done.
Wow.
Meaning, advocate for open schools during COVID in 2023. They told me I had to apologize. And I was like, are you insane?
Yeah, actually, I was right.
Well, I said I was right about everything. Why would I apologize?
And what did did they give an answer? No,
I just never got it.
Okay.
I mean, these were like long interview processes. Yeah. It's like for a CEO, it's like, 10 interviews, a battery of tests and IQ tests and psych profiles, and then I get that question. So somewhere around early 23, I realized I'm going to have to think of another path for myself because I need to work. I want to work. And I had this idea that I could start my own brand. Not what I had planned for this stage of my life, but that I had the capability, the work ethic, the willingness. And if I combine my athletic background with my apparel fashion experience, I could create an athletic brand that's willing to say a thing, which I'm willing to do, that you're not supposed to say, which is women deserve fair competition.
Right. So you're moving out of the COVID kerfuffle into the transgender kerfuffle.
Why not?
I mean, wow.
I already was canceled, so why not?
Let me ask you just plainly, as a woman, one, I do believe you could define what a woman is. We don't need to go there. I think you got it. But from that perspective, I mean, think of yourself in gymnastics or any other female sport. I mean, a biological male, look at you and me.
Yeah, you're tall.
I'm 64.
Yeah.
But in terms of the hormones that we're given as biological males, testosterone, all the things that help build structure and muscle mass, skeleton, all of it, it's genetically different than females. Duh. This is like saying kids should be in school during COVID. It's obvious. It's something we should be doing. Why do you think the left struggles with this so terribly, and they're defending it? Because
their politics is their religion, not to be dismissive of religion, but facts don't matter to them. It's like they've convinced themselves they are the good people. They're on the right side of history. They are not. Everything they're doing is anti-girl, anti-female, anti-woman. They don't even hear themselves. Men are taller, stronger, faster.
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
Every record, I looked this up, every world record in swimming and track and field for speed, if you compare, there isn't a single one where the women's time is faster than the men's in the same distance. And in fact, in most instances, a woman's time in either swimming or track and field, any distance, is beat by 15 and 16-year-old boys in high school.
Yeah.
The world record.
Right.
I mean, come on. Like, what more do you need?
Yeah.
I don't know why they're so committed. Why were they so committed to keeping children locked at home for 19 months during COVID?
Yeah, that whole bundle of, to me, confusion. It's kind of, in the Christian tradition, the book of Romans, it talks about the Lord handing them over to the deprivation of their mind. And what that means is during that Roman Empire, the decadence of what was occurring sexually, morally, like they couldn't see their way through it.
Yeah.
Like God just gave their hearts over to that darkness.
Decline.
And I, as a Christian, I kind of see that and going, we can't agree on what is true. You can't agree on what a woman is. Whether you're a Supreme Court justice and there's so much, there's a price to pay if you do on the left.
There is.
That you can't say in your confirmation hearing, yes, a woman is a female human capable of offspring, producing offspring, however you want to
your
define
body
it.
Is organized to produce large gametes and produce offspring. It's not complicated.
And that's why we just scratch our head and go, these people are so lost in what is true. Like, how do they get back there? Because their emotions are driving their thinking, and it doesn't work well that way on the right, on the left, or in the center.
No, it's complete.
You need some
It's complete derangement, and I believe truth does always out in the end. I don't know when it will happen. I think it will be some time.
Well, it's happening, it feels like.
It is, but let me give you this example. So about 80% of Americans agree with you and me. You'd think it's higher, but that men's sports, like get out of, I'm not even talking about can boys become girls. They cannot. But just that girls deserve their own sports and spaces. 80% of Americans agree. It's now the rule from the U.S. Olympic Committee. It's now the rule from the NCAA. And yet it's still considered a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like bullying people into not speaking,
right?
Not saying what you think, which is really dangerous.
And it's the bullies have the institutional power.
Right.
So they're in the media, they're leading universities. And so there's this, it's all like backwards because it seems like the mainstream view is boys can become girls and compete in girls' sports. I mean, even the headlines when the U.S. Olympic Committee, which only happened recently, set the rule that you have to be female to compete in women's sports. You'd think that wouldn't need to be a rule, but
it's kind of duh.
Yeah. The headlines in places like the Washington Post, trans women barred from competing in sports. No. Barred from competing in women's sports.
Right.
Men are barred from competing in women's sports. Men can compete in men's sports.
Yeah. You know, the person that really seemingly launched this was Leah Thomas, the swimmer. I mean, that was kind of national focus.
Yeah.
Very mediocre men's swimmer. I think he was ranked 700th and
460th.
Okay, you followed that.
Yeah.
But, you know, not record setting. And then he jumps to women's swimming and becomes
top
six and won many races. I was really impressed with Riley Gaines, who tied him. And her story, of course, is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They had the exact time.
Yeah.
And she's behind the podium and they're organizing, trying to do the awards. And she's told, you won't get the trophy.
Yeah.
Leah's going to get the trophy. And they had the exact time. I mean, why wouldn't you give her a trophy too? Or at least give her the first trophy? She is the biological woman.
Right.
And once again, you know, the culture is trying to flirt and dance with this thing called transgender athlete and recognize that. It's just, man, it's got to be heartbreaking for women who have worked hard.
Yeah. I mean, what I worry about sports, for all the trauma I endured, I think I am grateful that I competed in sports and I learned resilience and I learned so many things. And I fear that if boys are permitted to continue competing in girls' sports. I mean, last school year alone in track and field, I think there were over 70 instances of boys winning, standing atop the podium and displacing a girl. So to all the people who say this isn't happening, I have 70 examples in 1 year alone. At a certain point, girls will stop trying. If you don't have a fair fight, and so that's really the end of women's sports. I mean, if these people really believe there's no difference between male and female bodies, just make one category. Do it.
Right.
I dare you.
We know what's going to happen.
Right. And they don't really believe. If they really thought there was no difference between male and female bodies, they would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's self-evident. Think of boxing, just boxing. And there has been incidents of transgendered boxers,
There have been. So last summer at the Olympics in Paris, there were two males. Now, they're not trans, but they have DSDs, so disorders. They have chromosomal disorders. They were both male, and they won gold medals in the Olympics.
For women's boxing.
Yeah. Amani Khalif is the famous one. But now there's a new sheriff in town at World Boxing, and World Boxing is the first individual sport governing body that has said we will test for sex.
Which is the way it should be, actually. Do you see a way forward here? I mean, especially if we look 5 years, maybe it'll take 10 years, 15 years.
I think it's going to take that
long. It's going to self-correct with a lot of effort of women like Riley Gaines, yourself, and others saying, enough is enough. Let's be smart about this.
I think the fever will break, but I think it's going to take a really long. I think we're 10 or 15 years away. I hate to tell people. I do. I think we're a far way away. The left's identity is so wrapped up in this. Yeah. It's going to take brave. It shouldn't be brave, but journalists, clear-headed, fact-based journalists to stop writing those garbage headlines like the ones I described from the Washington Post. It hasn't hit the mainstream yet. The mainstream media, the legacy media is still describing this in such warped ways, but that's why nobody really pays attention to the mainstream media anymore.
They're losing their credibility.
But that's why, because they say stupid things like, what? If you say you're a woman, you are.
Right.
Well, no, you're not.
Right.
No, you're not.
And everybody knows that but you.
I feel like it's medical malpractice, to be sure. I mean, I think there will be major lawsuits. There have been moments in history. I mean, think about lobotomies.
Right.
Or recovered memory, which was another in the 80s, medical movement that took hold, and now everybody looks back on as quackery. But that took 20 years.
Yeah, it usually takes some time for the culture to reject a bad practice.
Right, because the people who are practicing it are never going to admit that they were wrong. So you need new people in to say, whoa, what those people did was wrong.
You know, Jennifer, when we look at the impact of the trans ideology, let me just call it that, you know, we have a wonderful documentary out called Truth Rising. It comes with a 4-part study. But Chloe Cole, who is a detransitioner, is part of that story. We have 5 or 6 stories in there that capture different aspects of this. And but Chloe, I think as a dad, I have 2 sons. I don't have daughters, but just as a father, every time I talk to her or hear her speak, it grips my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I cry for her.
I know.
Because she was this poor little girl who had gender dysphoria, 12, 13 years old. She felt like she looked like a guy. She felt like she should be a guy. Yeah. And then the medical community came around that, the school. Yeah. And all of a sudden she's being told, you are a guy. And you should go in for hormone treatment. Yeah. She had a double mastectomy by 14, I think, or 15. 15, yeah. And, you know, they were off to the races. And she said to me, like her mom and dad, she's so honoring to her mom and dad because she'll say, they didn't know. And they were told you'll have a dead daughter or a live trans son. Those are your options. You choose. Sign here. So they signed.
Yeah, of course.
What kind of fear does that give a parent to say, your daughter's going to die. She's going to kill herself if you don't do this. What option do you have?
It's grotesque.
And so then they whisk her into the treatments, the hormone treatments and the whole bit. And then I think if I remember that story, she saw a woman breastfeeding. And she thought to herself, what have I done to my body? It was kind of her awakening as a woman.
Yeah, interesting.
And she, you know, just went, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. I think it was Mark Yarhouse, Dr. Mark Yarhouse, who mentioned the metadata on transgender or gender dysphoria. Up to 90% of gender dysphoric children who preteen and teen will self-correct by 19 years old. 90%. Yeah. Leave them alone.
Yeah. And if I know Chloe, and we have worked with her. She's very brave.
Smart.
Very honest. Her quote-unquote dysphoria, I'll come to why I say that, was exacerbated during COVID also. So to kind of tie back, you know, these kids are isolated and alone. They're living fully online. They're getting snaps and applause for saying I'm trans. Right. And the whole sort of orientation is, if you've ever felt uncomfortable with your body, well, you're trans.
Yeah.
No. So I even reject this idea that, like, of calling it gender dysphoria. Yeah. Every girl, adolescent girl, is not happy with her body when she is maturing and going through puberty, probably boys as well. It's an awkward, uncomfortable time. We need to stop telling kids that means there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Just
get through puberty.
Get through it. Be kind, be empathetic. Also, don't make too big of a deal of it. That's the other thing I think you're uncomfortable. Get out there. Go play sports. Do something. Right. I mean, I couldn't stand my body and how I felt when I was...
Me neither.
It's terrible. It's awkward.
It's what it is.
Weird. It's just what it is. And the medical profession is telling these kids. So you find a kid who's unhappy, he's awkward. They're also preying on kids on the autism spectrum because, you know, they want to solve for this awkwardness. Yeah. And then you get the claps and the applause online, and then you go in and you tell the doctor, and they're like, well, yeah, here's the script. You're uncomfortable. That means you must be trans.
Billions of dollars.
It's so upsetting what's being done to these kids.
And those are we're really touching on the rolling boulders of culture right now when it comes to these issues. And I'm hopeful, like you are, to say hopefully in fewer years than many, the culture will come to its senses.
I think there is going to be too many detransitioners like Chloe Cole to ignore. Right now, they're still dismissed by the medical profession as, you know, well, first of all, they lose track of a lot of detransitioners, so they don't even know. They don't count them in their studies, right? They don't want to go back in because they get no support when they go back in. But the number of Chloes is growing and growing and growing, and they're going to be too loud and too big to ignore, and we're going to know that this is just a medical disaster.
You know, that's one of the things I admire about Europe, because they went headlong into it.
That's
but then Finland and Sweden and France and the UK, of course, with Tavistock, their hospital that was given to minors who had gender dysphoria and doing the sex change operations, the hormone treatment, boom, it all shut down because their doctors came back and said, we're doing more harm than good.
There's no evidence.
How about that?
This is not evidence-based medicine. I will say this, they started before we did.
Yeah.
So they're rolling it back before we are. But
even in that, you would think doctors would look at the evidence. They're scientists. They're not cultural warriors.
They are, though.
But they are now. Yeah, but they should be saying, okay, there's no evidence of improving this person's life. It's hurting them. So let's stop doing this.
It's ideologically driven. They don't care about the evidence. They'll manufacture evidence if they have to. If they can't manufacture it, they'll talk about lived experience, which has nothing to do with anything. Yeah. It's medical malpractice. It's really sad. But I do think Chloe and her cohort are going to be the difference makers in the end, because how can we ignore these children, now young women?
Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking, but I think it's so admirable what she's doing and speaking out and wanting to protect other children. And I agree with you. I'm always so touched by how protective she is of her parents.
Yeah, she's very kind.
I mean, I feel that way about, very different, but the parents were sucked into, because people always ask me about gymnastics, well, your parents allowed it to happen.
Right.
But they got sucked into that same,
right.
It was very ideological. It was like, this is the way you do it. If your daughter wants to be a champion, this is what's necessary. Oh, and by the way, the parents weren't even allowed in the gym, so they didn't see what happened.
Right.
And I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want them to pull me out. So I have a lot of empathy for them. They got sucked into this culture. And imagine if it's a medical professional telling you.
Oh, yeah.
Who were told, I mean, I don't trust them at all now on anything since
right.
COVID.
No, that's fair.
We're raised to trust medical professionals.
Of all the people in the culture, you should be able to trust. It's your doctor.
But of any profession, I feel they've really
rolled
beclowned themselves.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's sad, and hopefully we can get back. But there have been other medical sort of moments like we talked about earlier, whether it was lobotomies in, the 50s or recovered memory in the 80s. These are all viewed as embarrassments and stains on the profession, but we move past it eventually.
One of the things I've observed and I've talked to some people about when you look at it, the framers of this Constitution were brilliant. I mean, you can fault whatever, but these were highly intelligent people.
And young.
And they created this pendulum effect, right? Which should work in democracy, in a republic like we have, so that if things are out of kilter, you vote people in who will correct those things.
Yeah.
And it's worked beautifully for 250 years. If there is a republic that can survive longer, I think we're one of them because of those adjustments that are allowed. But they're thoughtful adjustments. The only concern I have is if you peg the pendulum with the media, with professions, with corporations. If you can peg that pendulum, meaning it doesn't swing back, it's caught.
It gets stuck
We're
because
in
all of
trouble.
that was one of the things. Like when I look back at COVID, if we think of the media as a fourth estate, as they're often called, they failed to do their job. They held no one to account.
Right.
They printed government-issued talking points, big pharma-issued talking points as if it was journalism. They did not interrogate the facts. And so for me, and I'm sure it started way before that, but for me, my mistrust in the media, and that's an important part of democracy.
Right. We need to know the truth.
Hold power to account, and they have failed to do that. They have become, at least the legacy media, an arm of the Democratic Party, propagandists for the Democratic Party. But you see the media landscape completely changing. Look, you have a podcast. There's so much independent media, so perhaps that's a self-correction mode.
Yeah, that could be. Even if it's pinned, there's going to be an alternative way
Seems
to get
there
news.
Is. I mean, no one's watching the old legacy media shows anymore.
The other muscle that comes into this is corporate muscle.
Yeah.
And even you had kind of some difficulty with Nike, I think. Nike's kind of on that edge at times, signing athletes, broadly described, to promote both a social agenda as well as a sports agenda. I mean, Nike was known for signing Michael Jordan. Hooray, everybody made millions of dollars. That's what business is about. I get that. But now they're into some strange stuff.
Well, you remember Michael Jordan famously said Republicans buy sneakers too. And when asked about why he doesn't make his politics known, those times are, long gone.
Yeah.
Nike, has a long history of treating women with astonishing disregard. The female executives, the athletes that they pay. And so we have pointed that out repeatedly, because one of the reasons I wanted to start this brand was I wanted to be what you see is what you get. What we present, what we care about, that's what we do. Yeah. What troubles me in corporate America is the hypocrisy. You know, Nike makes a lot of money off of pretending to champion female athletes. And in reality, they treat them with astonishing disregard. And so I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy.
Yeah, no, and it's good. I mean, it's bizarre that they get away with that, really, that no one's accountable.
It's crazy. Even their manufacturing practices, in China, and you know, it's come before the board at Nike many times. Maybe we should move our manufacturing out of China. So you understand, when you manufacture in China, there's no transparency. You can't visit the factories. You're not allowed in.
Right. That's crazy.
That's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been to every single factory we make.
But we'll give you a shoe for 40 cents less than anybody else can make it.
Yeah, and we'll just shut our eyes to what might be happening in there. And when it comes before the board, should we look at moving manufacturing out of China? They vote no every time. Yeah.
You know what's interesting, that hypocrisy you're mentioning, misogyny, the Me Too movement, totally valid. I mean,
completely came from
this is as old as human beings are. Men are they don't generally treat women well. I mean, there are wonderful men. Hopefully you're married to one. I think you are. But there are wonderful men, and they get it, and they're chivalrous, and they do the right thing. But then there are others who are just thugs when it comes to how to treat women. They're horrible. And, for the left to talk about misogyny of the right seems very hypocritical. When you look at Nike, you hear, just the way that even those on the left treat women. There's nobody stepping up to protect women.
Just be normal. It's so crazy. The misogyny I see from the left is astonishing. And I do think that the Me Too movement came from a place. Look, I grew up in an environment with rampant pedophilia. So, and then it sort of jumped the shark. And now there's this backlash, it led to this whole movement on the left of toxic masculinity. And we're telling all our little boys that they're toxic because of who they are. I have 3 sons. Right. This is not a way to raise chivalrous young men. Yeah. So that's really problematic, too. They seem to hate men and women. I don't know. I don't really understand it. And children. They don't want to have any children, and they think having children is really selfish.
So XXXY, what is the line? I haven't purchased anything from you. I'm sure I could.
You could, and I should have brought you something.
No, that was not a cheap way to get something free. But, what are you selling?
Yeah. So we make athletic apparel, everything from workout clothes like leggings, anything you could get from a brand like Nike or Lululemon.
For both women and men.
For both women and men. We sell more to women, but men really like the product because men believe in biological reality too. And really, in the broadest sense, we're just here to empower and stand up for female athletes. I wish I wish somebody had empowered and stood up for me when I was training. I want to give, we work closely with Riley. I want to give female athletes a platform so they can say what they think. Yeah. Any female athlete that is willing to stand up on this issue of fair competition risks losing endorsements, risks losing a scholarship. We want them to know they're supported and they can find community with us. They can get paid with us. But we make everything any of the top athletic brands makes. Our line is growing every day. We make casual things like sweats like this. Yeah. We make tennis gear, golf gear, workout gear. We're only a year and a little bit old, so we're going to start individual sports. So we'll develop a running specific collection next year, golf specific collection, and we'll just keep going. Soccer.
Does your golf gear actually improve your golf game?
I can't promise you that now.
Because if you can make that promise, I'm buying it.
I'm not going to go out on that limb.
Come on, just tell me yes. It'll be psychological for me. I'll hit the ball longer and straighter.
Maybe. If you believe in yourself, yeah.
Hey, I so appreciate your attitude. And, I wanted to ask you this question. There was a wonderful pastor in New York City, Tim Keller, who passed away a while back. But he and I, along with some other Christians, we were meeting with LGBT activists in Washington, D.C., 5 and 5. And one of the things at the end of that conversation, it was asked if we could have permission to give advice to the other side. It was all very polite.
Oh, interesting.
And really a good dialogue, just to have some discussion about what we're looking at. And Tim Keller, who was a scholar, well-read, he had read all the classics. He knew Plato. He knew Aristotle, along with Scripture and everything else. And he said something so profound. He said, New York City is probably the most multicultural city in the world. And he said, we get along for one basic reason. We don't go out of our way to poke our finger in the other guy's eye. And what he meant by that was obvious. He said Jews don't go out of their way to ask Muslims to provide services they cannot, and vice versa, and Christians, etc. He said to the gay activists there, we have to get to the point where you just don't go out of your way to sue the baker and sue just to prove your point. And I thought, wow, that is really wise. And I picked up on that with future dialogues that I had within my friendships within the LGBTQ community, just to say this is part of being at the big table now. Yeah. You can't be a more militant movement. You got to become now part of the table. Well, so how do we get along?
Yeah, well, one way is to not demand that you have extra rights. Because if you're a male and you are demanding access to women's spaces, you're demanding more rights. You're demanding to take her privacy away, take her opportunity away. And that's when I say no.
Yeah, that's good. That is so good. And, we're talking scholarships, too. That caught my attention. I don't think people get that, that when these biological males are in female sports, they're taking scholarships away from women.
They are. And
so they could become the head of Levi's.
Yeah. Or they're taking, they're taking the opportunity to celebrate, to, if you are a young girl who's 15 years old and you won the 100-meter dash in California and you didn't get to stand up there and take your trophy because the boy got it, that's taking something from that girl. That's a moment she should get. She deserved it. She earned it. Even if she doesn't get a scholarship, she deserved to stand up there and feel the pride of hard work and achievement. And that's being stolen from her. And not only that, it's being taken from her, and then she is told, you're a bad person if you mind.
Right.
If you dare stand up for yourself and your own privacy and your own achievement and your own opportunity, you're a bigot.
Yeah. And if you say anything, that's so true. That is well said, Jennifer. This has been fun. I so appreciate the chance to talk with you, and I will put my order in at XX. Which one am I again? Am I the XX or the XY?
You got the Y.
You got the XX.
I got the two X's.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'll put that order in soon.
You got the Y.
Okay, great. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching ReFOCUS. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next from ReFOCUS. For more episodes and helpful content, download the Focus on the Family app, available wherever you get your apps.